All right, today we are going to do a very quick swap. And we're going to go from the diamond file on the Leatherman Curl, and we are going to replace that with the saw. Now, this is actually something that I think a lot of people wanted and still do. Personally, I like both, and I think they are for different people, but as I've done in many different modifications, whether it's the P2, which I already showed, or carrying the Leatherman signal, I prefer the saw. I find the diamond file is a little bit easier for me to replace and or use elsewhere, even if it just means carrying that surge file, in something. So we're going to go ahead and make this swap. It should be quite easy. All you're going to need for this modification are a pair of hex bit drivers, in this case 2 very expensive screwdrivers, and T10 security Torx, a pair of them. You're going to need 2 for this. And if you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, you can use a clamp, but it is not necessary. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so with any luck, this should be a relatively simple modification. Close everything up. Stick it in our clamp. And you are going to need a pair of screwdrivers for this, because unlike the pivot on the tool side, the small tool side, these actually rotate freely and don't have that flat edge that locks into the frame. So you can use any 2 screwdrivers. In fact, for most of the time, I'm actually going to use some form of ratcheting T-shanks holder so I can put it up very close to the tool and keep it in line. But I just was in the process of kind of playing around and testing these a little bit more, and so I wanted to use these today. Now I have a feeling that I may have to, nope, it's easy enough. And one side should be easier than the other, and it looks like the screw is on the same side as the file. Now, because I can, I'm actually going to, why not? We're going to do it. We're going to go ahead and we're actually going to swap this around. I would rather the screw be on the opposite side so that this is coming in contact with the pivot instead of the screw. That way, if it's likely to unscrew itself, it will be much, much harder. So there is a file component, and next to the file, and let me just take this off for a second, there is going to be a copper washer. And of course we have the frame. Now at times I also have on me a Knipex plier wrench, and the reason I use this is because it actually has no teeth and it's not going to mar anything, but it gives me quite a firm grip, and I can grab it in different ways. So since we have the ability, we're going to take this off for just a second. Might as well look and see if it has anything different about it, and it doesn't. It's pretty much the same style of frame that I'm used to, with one exception. Instead of having the locking component that comes out to stop the blade on this side, it doesn't have that like it does on the Wave, but it still has a very similar design for the pliers. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to swap in a replaceable cutter, but believe it or not, there are some advantages to this, including additional strength. There's less metal removed, so you can actually get a little bit more force on this plier before it will snap. So just something to mention. But anyway, let's go ahead and put that back in. It's a pretty straightforward process. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the saw and I'm going to put the pivot through it, and then I'm going to put the copper washer, and you may have to press down on the frame in order to get it lined up. I'll go a little further. There we go. Just a little bit pressure on that spring, should be good to go. Now you shouldn't have to do much else than that. The putting in the screw should give you enough tension to pull the pivot all the way through. just if you're doing it in such a way that the screw is on the same side as that washer, you want to be careful that the washer isn't pinched, okay? And if it does that, you could actually crimp the washer, and then you're going to have to flatten it before you can actually reassemble. So I like doing it this way, where I have the pivot going through the implement, because there's 0% chance of me crushing that washer. So I tend to do this with anything that is on one side like this, where there isn't an additional implement, like the Leatherman Signal is a good example. But with the wave, you just want to be careful on both sides. Just be cautious when you do it. You don't crimp that washer. And what I will usually do is I will over tighten on purpose, just till the point where it's too difficult to pull out, which it is. And that means that this pivot is going all the way through past the other side. It also will tell me if there's additional space that needs to be taken up by a washer. If I tighten it all the way down and it's still flexible, it's moving, maybe I need to put an additional copper spacer so that it will, I can adjust the pressure, because otherwise I won't be able to adjust the amount of pressure. I'll have to tighten it all the way down. So this is way too tight. So let's loosen that up a little bit. You know, let's use the T-handled orientation. I like that better. That's pretty good. That's it. Easy peasy. Just a couple minutes. I would definitely say this is about a medium when it comes to difficulty. The only thing you want to watch out for, like I said, is if you're going to keep it the way it was oriented when it came, don't let yourself crush that washer. And the way you can do that is, as you're screwing it down, I'll show that real quick. As you're screwing it down, once you start feeling pressure, unscrew it a little bit and then keep moving it. And what will happen is the pivots themselves are kind of crowned, and they'll wiggle themselves into the hole of that washer, so you're not accidentally crimping it. So just take your time. Don't just crank down on it really quickly, because if you crush it, it's just not going to function as well as it would otherwise. And if you're not like me and you don't have an entire pile of spares, you're going to be in for a bad day. So just keep that in mind, and this should be pretty smooth. So as it sits, now this is in the tool set that I think is pretty damn near ideal, in fact. It's not really missing anything other than having locking implements, but there's the advantage of ergonomics without having those tools in there, the locking mechanism. So I don't know, it's a give and take. I really like the Curl personally. I think it's a great tool. When I reviewed it before, I said I just wish it was a little cheaper. It's funny because now it's $10 more expensive. But no, I like this tool quite a bit. And the only things you're really losing from this, compared to the Wave, is the serrated blade and the diamond file. Now the diamond file is a big deal. The serrated blade isn't as big a deal, but that tool does not have, what am I saying? Does not have a reamer awl, which this does. So I really like this tool set. And the cool thing is as long as you are not losing this, you can always reassemble it if necessary, if you bought this from Leatherman. And I doubt very much that that's going to affect the warranty. I mean, you're not modifying the actual implements themselves. It's a gray area, but my impression is this is pretty tame as far as modifications are concerned. And if I paid Leatherman for this full price, I wouldn't hesitate to turn it in if something else came up. That's just me personally. I would swap the file back in, but you get the idea. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.